Namaste and hello. My name is Yogi Kai, in case you haven't visited my channel before, and I appreciate you stopping in. I make these videos as a sharing, not as a teaching. Um, my personal world is such that it's led me to an unusual way of thinking. Your personal world has led you to a different way of thinking. I'm hoping that through these videos, one, I can pass my accumulated understanding of life on to somebody who can use it. That may be you, it may not be. But I don't want to die with this information still in me without sharing it. So here you go. The topic of today's talk is the second shift of consciousness. This was brought up by a friend. We were discussing the difference between being a grown-up and being an adult according to our respective understandings. I personally feel that there are very few adults in the world, but there are a great many grown-ups, and I'll explain that. So, when we are young, we think that when we're children, we think that the world is a certain way. And we're pretty secure in that knowledge. If you ask a child, is this the way things are? A lot of them will say, yes, that's the way things are. As we continue through life, sometime around the 13-year-old or 13 age mark, people say, or we have a shift in consciousness. It's a very fundamental shift. And as we from childhood to adolescence, we have this shift that says, oh, wait a minute, the world is not exactly the way that I've thought it was. It's a little different. It's something much more expansive. So now, as an adolescent, we now know how the world works, and we can look at a child and we can say, oh, yeah, well, they're pretty innocent. They don't really know anything. And as we continue to grow through life, we are educated at schools or wherever, and at some point, some grown-ups say, you are now a grown-up and you can play on the outside of the playground fence. You can go out there. Instead of playing with plastic cars, you can play with real cars, metal cars. Instead of playing with baby dolls, you can have babies and things like that. Instead of playing house, you can actually live in a house of your own. And the common way of looking at that is to intermingle the words grown up with adult. Now, my definition of those two words or those two concepts, grown up, adult, is different. There is no shift between being an adolescent and being a grown up. Basically, the only way that we know that we're grown ups is other grown ups say, you're now old enough to play on the outside of the fence. Go ahead. And so you move out, and a lot of the activities of childhood are reconfigured, but they're the same activities, but they're reconfigured into the grown-up world. Just to give you an example, I will describe a game to you. You tell me if you recognize what the game is before I'm done. Now, I say it in your own head or figure it in your own head, but I think you'll recognize where I'm going with this. So, at the beginning of the game, there's quite a bit of excitement, and then everybody runs and hides, and they hope they don't get noticed. But if they do get noticed, they hope that they can make it to base before they get tagged, because if they get tagged, they're out. Does this sound like a game that you might recognize? Here's a little bit of a possible shocker for you. I just described a paycheck job. We hope that we don't, when we get the job, that's the beginning of the game, we get the job, and we hope that we don't get noticed for doing anything negative while we're learning how to play the game. Um, but if we do get noticed, we hope that we get noticed for something that is valuable enough. In other words, we're reaching base, um, that we don't get tagged or fired or reprimanded or something of that nature. So this same dynamic holds true through all aspects of living in the grown-up world. The games of childhood are just reconfigured for the grown-up world. This is because the second fundamental shift of consciousness hasn't happened yet. And because we intermix those two words, grown up, or those two concepts of grown up and adulthood, because we intermix those and define them somewhat similarly, we don't seek that, typically don't seek that second shift. I know that I was somewhere in my early 30s before I even learned that there was a second shift to be seeking. So maybe this talk or this sharing will prompt you to look for that second shift. So the second shift of consciousness is the one that I think takes us from grown-uphood to adulthood. And the difference between the two is primarily personal responsibility. And what I mean by that is, if you are going through something or have gone through something, and you blame what you're going through on anybody or anything else, then that puts you in a state of victimhood. You feel like a victim on the inside. Something out there harmed me. This is often demonstrated when you hear words like, "You made me mad," or even something as nice as, "You make me happy," or even going way out on a limb, "I love you." What is it that you love? Do you love them? Well, how do you know? Because you don't really know them. They're showing you a certain part of themselves, and even if they're your spouse or your child or something, they still spend more time out of your presence than in your presence. And if you have never traced love back and said, "Oh, okay, what is this love I feel?" Oh, I see I'm going into a tangent. I'll go there. So what is this love I feel? Is it conditional in any way to some behavior of yours? If I'm going to love you, I'm going to love you just because you are. You're there. You're you. You are this individual. But it's my thoughts about you that I love. It's the way I feel when my thoughts are triggered about you, and I really enjoy you. However you show up in the world, it is fascinating. It's awesome. So there's that, a love that is unconditional. It's like the love that you have for your mother or father or whoever it is that you're most connected to. And it doesn't matter what they do. You're going to love them anyway. You see that they make mistakes and they're not the best. They have odd ways of looking at things, but so do you, right? So anything that I blame on another, then that puts me in a subservient position, right? Somebody else has to change before I can change. That's grown-uphood. That's taking the skills that we learned as children and adolescents, the way of thinking, and bringing it into the grown-up world and saying, yeah, this is, you hurt my feelings. No, you didn't. My feelings, my emotions, my thoughts are 100% invisible, immaterial, and totally subjective only to me. You cannot touch my emotions, my feelings, or my thoughts. You cannot manipulate them. I have to do that. Now, I can do that with your help. If you're leading me in a direction with information or activities, well, I can go along with you or not. If I don't feel that I have that choice, if I have to go along with you, if that's what my feeling is, oh, I was powerless not to go along with you. Well, that doesn't change the fact that, yes, you did have the power not to go along. You may not know that you had the power. It, just as a child doesn't know how to drive a car, it's not a bad thing. It's just, well, you haven't got there yet. And so anything that you blame on others, well, that's an area of stuckness. That's an area where you have loaned your power. You have, I forget the word for it. It's when you deny your own power. You say, no, it's not my power. I don't have the power to change that. But you have the power to change this and this. You can change those things. That's what's within your power. Now, see, an adult recognizes that nothing out there, except for on the physical plane. I mean, you could break my arm or something like that. But how I feel about you breaking my arm is my lookout. You may have done the actual act, or something else, an accident or whatever, may have broken my arm. That's the physical activity of the common shared world. You will see my broken arm. I will see my broken arm. Someone else will see my broken arm, unless I was raised in a society that doesn't recognize such things. And from what I understand, those are very rare. But if it's my responsibility, if I accept everything that shows up in my life, good, bad, indifferent, it really doesn't matter. Anything that comes into my life, because of the fact that it's happening, this is the reality. The activity is actually going on. There is nothing you can do about that. It is your felt sense experience of the present moment. That's the event. It is neutral. Even if someone's yelling at you, even if somebody's freaking out, it is neutral. You could have an accident, that's neutral. Somebody could kill your brother, that's neutral. I know it doesn't seem like it. It's way out there to be able to understand that particular concept, but based on the common world. But because of the fact that it is happening, if I resist what's happening, then I'm going to get all upset and I'm going to lose my power to choose. I'll be stuck. It's an area of stuckness. How do we get out of stuckness? But if I choose whatever is going on, I have to go through it. It doesn't matter what it is. It's happening, and I'm in the process of going through it. If I resist it and say, no, I don't want this, then I'm trying to hold off reality. But with what? I can't hold off reality. Reality is what is. It's what's happening. This is reality. You listening to this talk and watching my face on your screen, if you happen to be doing so while you're listening, well, that's the reality of the moment. That and many other things that are going on around you. That's your personal world, and this is what's going on. Well, if I resist that, then if I say, no, that's somebody else doing it to me, can you see where that's a victim response? That puts us into victim mode. It gives away our power. But if I say, I choose this, I want this to happen, well, you might as well. It's happening whether you resist it or not. You're much more likely to be able to find an answer, a skillful response. If you choose what is happening and you say, okay, well, I recognize that this is going on. This is very unpleasant, and that's okay. It'll change. I'll learn something from it, and I'll go on, and it'll become a benefit at some point. You can relax into whatever it is that's going on. So the second shift of understanding, little side story, I don't know what to call it, but a little side fact is I heard one time that in Japan, a person may be considered a grown-up until they're 50. Once they pass 50, then they're considered an adult. And you can do all the things that an adult can do, but there's that shift of understanding, that shift of that recognition of a certain amount of experience and understanding of self and others and how the world is working, that we got to kind of grow into. Now, I've met a lot of grown-ups, older than me. I'm 60, and I've met 75-year-olds, 80-year-olds who still hasn't made that shift of consciousness that takes you from a grown-up into adult based on my definition of those two concepts. They still think that this is the way the world is, and they don't recognize all the shades of gray that's involved. And they resist the present moment, the reality of being alive, you know. And there's a saying that what you resist persists. And the reason why is when you resist it, you're saying that has reality. That way of thinking is true. And it runs counter to the reality of the moment. Those areas of reality that you're not aware of because, frankly, you haven't had the experience yet to be able to, the experiences yet in your personal world to be able to look at those events and say, oh, wait, yeah, there's many ways of looking at that. If there's many ways of looking at something, then it can't be true. Truth is just self-evident. And ultimate truth, if there is such a thing. And so I gave the example. Well, here, I'll give you another one. When I was a young man, when I first ran away from home, I think my mom says I was 15. I kind of think I was younger than that, but we'll go with that, 15. And I ran out to Hollyweird. That was my first stop. And when I ran away at this particular juncture that I'm describing right now, it was for the duration. So that's when I started my adult life, my grown-up life. And so I was picked up by a highway killer. I forgot what his first name was, but Bodine was the last name. And he had killed like 18 hitchhikers at that time. I think he wound up killing 22 or 24 before he was caught and arrested and all that. And I would have been 19, would have been number 19, based on my calculations. And I was able to escape that situation by the hair of my teeth. Good thing I had a full set of teeth back then. Otherwise, I might not have made it. But that's a story in and of itself. And for many years, I kind of blamed him for my situation. And I was out hitchhiking. When you're hitchhiking, you don't have any real control over who you get a ride with. And, well, you can look in there and see, oh, he's got a gun, I'm not getting in that car, or something like that. But if a person seems reasonable and you're hitchhiking, you're going to get in the car. And he started getting weird pretty close when we got up to 60 or 70 miles an hour. And all of a sudden he started getting weird. And so that was a traumatic event for me. Until I recognized that, hey, I learned an awful lot from that situation. And, I'm going to choose that memory. I'm going to choose that event. And as soon as I chose that event, all the trauma around that event vanished. Now, when I say choose, I'm not saying superficial, just, I'm saying it up here. I mean here. I chose it. Okay. That was my reality. That was my history, his story. Story is an important word there. A story is just a viewpoint from one direction. So, I'm going to, I see that I'm at 20 minutes already, and I wanted to keep these talks shorter, but I'll go until it stops. Um, my own second shift of consciousness happened from a traumatic event or an abrupt ending of a relationship, a very special relationship. And I had fallen in love with this woman, and we had moved in together, and things were going swimmingly. And it was an awesome relationship. And I know that she just absolutely loved me dearly, and I loved her dearly. And so one day, contrary to what anybody thought of me at the time, because nobody thought I would ever do it, I asked her to marry me. And she said no. And then 2 days later, she broke up with me. This hit me like a ton of bricks. It came out of the blue and just knocked me off my feet, so to speak. And my brain shut down. I was in absolute shock. And I'm standing there in the living room. We're in a 2-bedroom apartment, and 1 bedroom was my study. And we had a large living room, kitchen combination, and a huge bedroom. It was a great apartment. And so she had come out, told me she wanted to break up with me, went back into the room, and shut the door. I just stood there. I had no idea what to do. My brain had gone silent. There was no motivation, nothing. I couldn't think of anything to do. There was just nothing there. And I'm standing there with a blank mind, and all of a sudden I saw this thought arise. It started as a little bubble, and it popped. And when it popped, I got the thought. It was an actual experience. I was reading The Power of Now at the time, and I had by Eckhart Tolle, and I had the book laying open on the table, and sorry, I got a little ahead of myself. This wasn't the thought. I looked at the book, and the thinking maybe I could find some comfort from that, because I'd been studying it for a while. I had had a meditation practice for a while, and I looked at the page, and the words were run around on on the page. The letters were run around on the page like ants. There was no way to make any sense out of that. And so I just stood there for a minute, and this is where the thought came in. Go check the mail. Only thought. Nothing else. Think of a blank screen with all of a sudden these words appearing on the screen. That's kind of the way it happened. I had no resistance to that because nothing was going on in here. And so I went over and I slid open the sliding door, and I looked out at a tree. And I don't know what it was about the tree that triggered it, but all of a sudden, that which was me up until that time, that which was the Brit, which is my name. It's an adopted name. It's now my legal name. But that which I identified with vanished. It just expanded so far that there were no edges. I call it experiencing the mind of God. But I don't know what it was. It was just, there was no me here. There was no one experiencing. But that which was present at the time was equally aware of everything all at once. That in the Bible it talks about something, there's not a hair that falls that God isn't aware of, no bird that flies or whatever. And it's true, because in my experience, that, when I say I put it in quotations, at that time there was no me, but I was everything all at once. But there was no I. It just was. It was just consciousness, universal consciousness. Everything was aware. Everything was equally present. There was no past or future. It was all happening all at once. And then after some indeterminable time, I think it was just a few minutes, all of that squeezed itself back into this form. And I went skipping on to go check the mail. And from that point on, I was happy for several years. I mean, ecstatically happy. It was trippy. And a couple of days later, my girlfriend came back and said, "Oh, you scared me with that question. Yes, I do want to get married." But things had changed, and at that point, I no longer felt that need. And over the years, I've learned what that was, that experience. It's called Satori, or awakening to one's true self, or moksha, self-realization. It's a recognition of there is something that is paying attention to your thoughts. What is that? And you can both think and be aware of thinking. You can be aware of the content, and you can be aware of the act. Those two things together indicate that there is something else that's observing all of that. Well, I was never taught how to look for that. I was never taught that is the second shift. When your identification switches from this physical world, this personal world of mine, this common world of ours, to something much grander, something much larger than that. There is an experience of taking full responsibility. You just know. It's here. You know that what is going on is your doing. And you can resist it or you can accept it. If you resist it, you're going to stay in grown-uphood, adolescent. They did it to me. I'm powerless. I have to wait for them to change in order for me to change. And then there's the adulthood of it all is reality. And I just accept reality. It's just the way it is. And so if I accept it, then I can do something about it. If I see a hole, I can fill it in or walk past it. It's my choice. This will go on for a long time, so I'm going to end with a story. A man walks down the street, sees and falls into a hole. The next day, he gets out somehow. The next day, he walks down the street and he falls into the hole. Over and over this goes. Finally, one day, he walks down the street, he sees the hole, but still falls in it. And this goes on for a little while. And then at some point, he walks down the street, he sees that hole, he walks around it. Then on another day, he walks down the street, he sees someone else in the hole. He jumps down and helps them out and then climbs out of the hole himself. And that is the difference between grown-up and adulthood. If you don't see the hole and you fall in it, which is what, God, we all do it, well, that's still innocence. If we see the hole and still fall in it, well, that's grown-uphood. We haven't yet developed our own power of understanding great enough to be able to not fall into the hole. We can't resist our own urges. We can't resist our desire to resist and we can't resist our habits. And so we fall in the hole, even though we see it's there. We know that it's not smart to yell at people, because if you're trying to yell at people, who's going to listen when you're being yelled at? There's no skill involved in yelling at somebody. The skill comes when you can speak in such a way that the other person is willing to give you a listen. And if my defenses are up against you, well, I'm not going to give you a non-biased listen. I'm not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. So yelling at somebody is very unskillful if you're trying to communicate. But yet we do it. And we know that that's the thing. You know that that's the case. But you can't resist yet because you haven't developed you haven't reclaimed enough of your own personal power. You haven't actually been taught that you can do different. You may know you can do it up here. You may think, believe that you can do different. But you don't actually know that you can do different. Knowing goes from here to here. This is believing, this is knowing. So, and again, I can go on and on. This type of stuff is interesting to me, so I've studied it for a long time. Anyway, I hope that you can get something out of this sharing. And I really do. I hope that something in these 30-something minutes connected. And you can take it. Oh, wow. That seems to fit my personal puzzle. And grow from it. If you like this, if you like the talk, if you have any questions, if you have any comments or whatever, please feel free to drop them into the comments below. I will try and respond as soon as I can. And like and share the video if it seems yours to do. If you'd like to donate, eventually I'm going to get a donation button up or something. I live off of donations, so anything you give would be greatly appreciated. And I pay forward instead of paying back, unless of course it's an actual loan. I still haven't gotten used to asking for that. And I hope that your life is a fantastic one. I hope your experience in life is incredible. And I hope you find that second shift. Because when you do, your personal world will change in such a spectacular way. Now, maybe the way that you get to that shift, the way you experience the shift, is different than mine. Most likely will be. But you'll know it when you see it. Don't get scared of it. A lot of people have them, and then it's so different from the common world perspective, what we grow up believing the world to be, that people will get scared of it and push it away. And that's unfortunate. But then again, that's also reality. So anyway, this one's kind of hard to stop. So namaste. I hope you have a beautiful one.